Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, Efe Ajagba beat Stephen Shaw by a 10-round unanimous decision. Going into this fight, I was actually somewhat looking forward to it. I wouldn't say I marked it on my calendar or anything like that, but I felt this fight going in was relatively intriguing. I'd seen a bit of Stephen Shaw here and there, and I felt he was okay, decent enough boxer, and potentially that he could give Efe Ajagba some trouble. And yeah, I felt it could be a good fight. However, it never really turned out that way, quite frankly. This was a real tentative type of bout. Neither guy really seemed keen to take any real risk. And yeah, primarily, most of the action was from the jab, from both guys. But yeah, first 2 to 3 rounds, I actually felt Stephen Shaw looked okay. He was taking his head off centre line quite well. And he was quite active with his jab, you know. He was able to get in and out on Efe Ajagba and land his jab, and sometimes he was doubling up the jab. Despite having a height and reach advantage, he was able to get in and out quite well, whereas Ajagba, yes, he was still landing his jab, but he hadn't quite got his distance down in the first sort of 2 to 3 rounds, and he was only really throwing single jabs to the head, which was quite easy for Shaw to contend with. So after sort of 3 rounds, I felt maybe that Shaw was 2 rounds to 1 up, something like that. Again, I wasn't scoring this fight round by round, but yeah, maybe after 3 rounds, Shaw was slightly getting the better of it, but they were close rounds. I felt after round 3, however, Efe Ajagba started to get a little more aggressive. He started to box on the front foot a little more, behind that jab, and the output from Stephen Shaw would then start to drop quite drastically. And yeah, one thing I liked about Efe Ajagba in this fight, he was showing more variety with his jab after the 3rd round. He wasn't just booming it out there one jab at a time. There were times when he was doubling it up. There were times when he was alternating between the stab jab to the body. Sometimes he would then fake that shot and jab to the head. And he was also varying the speed of his jab. So after the 3rd round, I felt there was more variety on Ajagba's jab. And he started to get his sense of distance correct. And he was keeping Stephen Shaw at arm's length. And yeah, Shaw's jab was nowhere near as effective at this point in time. And not only that, he started to, his output started to drop as well. And yeah, I mean, round sort of 4 onwards, Ajagba was picking these rounds up primarily based on that jab alone. He really wasn't doing anything special. He wasn't forcing the fight. But he was still winning the rounds, in my opinion. There were times when he would actually throw the straight right hand to the body, but he was very rarely loading up with that right hand to the head like he usually does. In fact, the few times when he did throw the right hand in this fight, he wasn't loading up like he usually does. He was throwing it quick behind the jab, not really turning into it and putting everything into it, but trying to rely more on speed. And that was an interesting adjustment from Ajagba. It feels like, watching that fight, it does look like he's been working on things in the gym. He is still very basic, but I liked some of the things that he was showing in this fight, albeit, you know, he didn't exactly execute it correctly 100% of the time. But regardless, he was the guy who was scoring with his jab. He was the guy primarily who was the ring general. And occasionally, yeah, Stephen Shaw would come back with a snappy jab or a quick jab, sometimes a sneaky check left hook. But ultimately, there just wasn't really anything of substance coming back from Stephen Shaw as this fight played out. And yeah, Ajagba would land the odd right hand, but primarily it was his jab that was doing his work there. And yeah, at the end of this fight, at the end of the 10 rounds, I felt Ajagba clearly won 8 rounds to 2, maybe 7 rounds to 3 if you're really generous. And yeah, the right man got the decision. I'm not sure what Stephen Shaw was talking about after this fight. I mean, he was saying he clearly won this fight. I mean, you got to throw punches to win fights, son. You know, and he just didn't do that. And I think he had the speed. I think he had the speed to really trouble Ajagba because he was the quicker guy. In terms of his hand speed and foot speed, he was the quicker guy. And yeah, Tim Bradley made a good point, which is quite rare for him on commentary. But every time you see Ajagba, every time you see one of his opponents put 2 or 3 shots together, Ajagba doesn't really respond well. He shells up, he doesn't punch with you, and he tends to lose his shape. I mean, Stephen Shaw never did that once in this fight. Despite having the hand speed too, he had the shorter arms, so theoretically he should have been more comfortable at mid-range and also on the inside, but Stephen Shaw wasn't willing to take any risks here, and for me, Efe Ajagba clearly won this fight. Ajagba himself could have done more, but at the same time, it was really down. He never had to. What he was doing after round 3 was winning him the fight. He never had to make adjustments. It was Stephen Shaw who had to turn this into a fight, and he never did, which basically resulted in Efe Ajagba getting a pretty comfortable win. So yeah, he beat Stephen Shaw, who was previously unbeaten going into this fight. I think he had a record of like 18-0. So it's a good win for Efe Ajagba. Having said that, do I see Ajagba doing anything of consequence in the heavyweight division? Not really. I appreciate that he's working on things in the gym, but I don't see a high level of talent with Ajagba. He's a big, strong guy in good shape, does have good power. But again, when he steps up, I think he'll be found out like he was against, what's that guy's name? Frank Sanchez. I think Efe Ajagba would be a good test for Jared Anderson. I think that would be a good fight for him. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. As for Stephen Shaw, got to be real. I never want to see this guy fight again. He got a big opportunity here. ESPN, television, exposure. And he puts in that sort of performance. Really poor in my opinion. Stephen Shaw reminded me of one of those fighters who's a really good sparring partner, but when it comes to under the lights, he doesn't really do much. It looks like he's got that sparring partner mentality, and I know he's been sparring with Wilder for the best part of 5 years, and yeah, maybe he just has that sparring partner mentality. Who knows? But yeah, Efe Ajagba won the fight. I would say sort of 8 rounds to 2, 7 rounds to 3. But yeah, share your thoughts below. What did you make of this fight? Peace.